Sweet the whispers in your ear whenever ember wanders near.
It kind of, well, we can watch it. I'm not going to commentate on it too much in the beginning because it does go over stuff that we have already talked about. So for like the first part of this, I may not be doing a lot of like pausing for yapping unless it seems very necessary. But this is I believe he's a lawyer, correct, Tatsunashi? Who basically has dug up some more information about the American Fork Police Department to include previous lawsuits that have been levied against them and like information regarding their training of their officers. So the first half of this is going to be a lot of recap, which is why I said I probably will not do too much talking in regards to it for the first half because I've already gone over it ad nauseum of what he's going to be talking about in the beginning, but just, basically to keep the points salient while we're going through, because one point may build upon another point later in the video. So we're gonna check this out and see what kind of new information we can glean in regards to America's least favorite police department right now.
Last couple of episodes, we walked through 4 days in March, document by document, video by video. And we found real constitutional violations. You had the prolonged traffic stop with the dog search, where they searched the vehicle longer than they searched the house. A protest sign seized off a public sidewalk, and 5 people arrested in a home when the warrant named exactly one of them. And the officers arrested in a home
hang on.
when the warrant named.
And what is this? Oh, in order to effect the arrest of him. Okay, so it's a search warrant in order to effect the arrest. That I hadn't seen.
Exactly one of them. And the officers admitted on camera they didn't even know who the other people were.
You guys are going to go to the PD. We're going to figure out what we're doing, and then some of you may end up going to jail. Some of you may end up getting released. We'll see what happens.
And then every single time we ran into the same wall, qualified immunity. The doctrine that says an officer can violate the Constitution and still walk away. Unless, of course, there's a prior case on point that would put that violation beyond debate. Some of these claims, I think, survive that test. Some probably don't. But here's another interesting angle. There is a defendant in this story that qualified immunity does not protect. It's not the officers, not the detective, not the chief. It's the city of American Fork itself. And the single best piece of evidence for that case might be a 26-minute video published by the police department, narrated by the chief of police. He walked through every one of these incidents and stamped his approval on each one. Today, we're going to talk about Monell. It's how you can sue a city and why the city can't claim immunity, and why the department's own transparency campaign may be Ben's Exhibit A.
Yes. By the way, is the volume okay? Can you guys hear it okay?
I'm Brandon Grable, Texas civil rights attorney, and before we get into this video, I want to talk to you about today's sponsor, Plod. As an attorney, I'm in client meetings, consultations, interviews, and depositions all day. The detail that I forget to write down is the one that always ends up mattering. That's the one reason why I used Plod Note Pen S. It can clip right onto my tie or my shirt, so my hands stay free and I'm actually listening to the person in front of me instead of having to scribble notes. Let me show you what that actually looks like for me. This is an intake that I just ran. And so what the app does, it turns the whole conversation into a clean, searchable transcript. It actually starts with an outline so you can see timestamps for specific parts of the conversation. So every detail is captured exactly as it was said. It also generates a summary and notes, so I've got the key points without having to re-listen to the entire thing. And that matters depending how long the conversation actually is. And so when I go here, it actually gives me an officer name and badge number. But let's say the conversation is dense and long and you want specific information. Or I don't want to look at the summary. Maybe there's a specific question I have about what just happened. For example, what was the officer's badge number? Well, I will go to Ask Plod here. What was the officer's badge number? Enter. It's going to analyze the whole transcript, and then it's going to give me that information. And that's potentially a detail that I would have never caught writing by hand. But Plod, they were able to pull it in seconds. As a lawyer, I'll add the obvious caveat. Know your state's recording laws before you record anyone. And Plod's whole pitch is doing this the right way, and it meets the privacy and security standards that I care about for sensitive work. Capture the conversation, keep your own record, and decide later what matters. And right now, you can get up to 15% off with code CE15.
Well, I think
you can
there's
either
an
check the link
LLM
in the
built into
description
this.
or use the QR code on the screen.
Oh,
Let's
for
get
free?
back into it. So quick recap about what I think are pretty strong claims. You have the March 9th stop, which they basically held them in place to be able to search their vehicle and to, quote, scare them. Well, under Rodriguez versus United States,
Yeah.
the Supreme Court held that extending a stop beyond its mission, legitimate mission, without independent reasonable suspicion violates the Fourth Amendment. I think it's a strong claim. There was no reason to keep them there for as long as they did, if at all.
Yeah.
And then on March 11th, the police officers took a sign down from the public space. The neighbor gave them permission to hang it. But the cops decided, you know what, this could be defamatory, or this could be harassment. And it's possible that under the 10th Circuit's court decisions, which I discussed previously, could hold that, yeah, there was a constitutional issue, but it wasn't clearly established enough. And then you have the March 11th raid, a warrant which was based on an alleged statement that maybe they have Legos, even though there was never any legal investigation, identified the purpose was to arrest.
That's an excellent point that he brings up. There was no investigation initiated for stolen Legos. They got this warrant for stolen Legos. Where's the investigation into this? That's something that Ben needs to bring up in his court cases, is when they go through discovery, where's the inciting investigation into stolen Legos that you actually issued a warrant for? Where's the paper trail for that? If they can't provide a paper trail for an open investigation into stolen Legos by the complainant, which was the whole basis for their warrant in the first place, it's all fruit of the poisonous tree. It's, you never conduct an investigation for Legos, so why did you initiate a warrant for stolen Legos when there was no investigation to begin with? And then the warrant could be invalidated, and therefore anything that they achieved via the warrant would be fruit of the poisonous tree, and the whole case would just come collapsing down.
One person, but then they arrested everybody, even if they couldn't identify them. And I think that violates.
I thought the claim was the Airbnb owner overheard them talking about stolen Legos, and that was why they called the police. That I don't know if it's unclear. It's unclear. Yeah, number one, it's hearsay. That's number one. That the Airbnb owner overheard them talking about Legos. That's hearsay for number one. But number two, even if they initiated that, there would still be an inciting investigation, and there would still be documentation that they're conducting an investigation into possible stolen Legos. Granted, the hearsay would kill that case off immediately, and any police officer worth his salt that has some random Airbnb owner say, "Hey, I heard these guys talking about stolen Legos," and they've got no complainant because the Airbnb owner is not a complainant. Unless they have a complainant on file to initiate an investigation saying, "I had Legos stolen from me," which we have heard butt kiss about thus far, then there's no investigation. There's no reason for them to obtain a search warrant for Legos. And therefore, the warrant, a warrant was obtained under false premise, which would then invalidate the warrant, which would then invalidate the search, would then invalidate any seizure, which will also invalidate any arrest, which would also invalidate any interrogation that occurred afterwards, which was their entire basis for facilitating arrest. It would basically all become fruit of the poisonous tree. Goodbye, case closed. Now let's go after AFPD for civil rights violations.
Supreme Court precedent. Your mere presence near someone suspected of a crime, legitimate or not, isn't probable cause to seize and arrest you. So do you notice the pattern in these incidents? The violations are real across the board, but qualify to me.
No, Josh never, in the video footage we saw, Josh never made a claim that they stole Legos. Josh never made a claim. Brandon did that bullshit on the phone call back when Ben was in Salem. And Brandon, like when they're having the conversation, and that wasn't even an accusation. That was just like, he was talking with Ben on the phone and was saying like, "You stole the Legos." And Brandon said, "Fuck you, I'll say you stole the Legos." And it was a back and forth like that. But where is the actual complainant? Where's the actual inciting complainant or the inciting investigation with the American Forks PD that would have them looking for Legos in the first place? If they cannot produce that, if they cannot produce a report saying that, okay, so and so came to me and reported stolen Legos with information that would lead them to believe that Ben stole them, if they don't have that investigative report, they've got nothing. They've got no basis for that warrant in the first place.
Community is going to filter them out unevenly. Not by how wrong the conduct was, but by whether some earlier court
Josh
got
Brandon,
to that
whoever
issue
said it.
first. That's the loophole. But that loophole only applies if qualified immunity is at play. And I want to discuss with you today a Monell claim. In 1978, the Supreme Court decided Monell versus Department of Social Services of the City of New York. The Supreme Court held that a city is a person you can sue under Section 1983, but and this is the part that shapes everything, a city is not automatically on the hook just because it employs officers who violate your rights. There's no concept of the boss pays for the employee's torts, not in Section 1983. It all comes down to what can you establish as far as knowledge and intent, really, of the city and its, quote, policymakers. So to hold the city liable, you have to show the city itself did it through an official policy or custom, even if that...
Hold up. That's an excellent point. Josh wouldn't be an interested party in stolen Legos because he never reported any of his Legos being stolen. If Brian's Legos were stolen, he would have to be the interested party withstanding. You are absolutely correct there. That's a factor I didn't qualify. You're right. If the Legos were stolen, then neither Josh nor Brandon nor Bricks and Minifigs would be the complainant party. It would be Brian that would be the complaining party. So literally the Legos, unless they're making an accusation of stolen Legos that was not a part of Brian's collection. Again, all of this means nothing if there's no initial report. If there's no official report in regarding to any Legos whatsoever being stolen in the first place, none of it maps.
Official policy or custom is not having one, that the city was the moving force behind the violation. There are a handful of recognized ways to prove this, and I want to discuss 4 of them that I think apply here. The first is there a formal written policy? This is rare because cities don't usually violate the Fourth Amendment into their manuals. 2, you could have a custom. You have to show that there was a practice so persistent and widespread that it has the force of policy, even though no one wrote it down. 3, you have a decision or after the fact ratification by a final policymaker. So if the official with that final authority over the relevant policy...
If Josh really thought the Legos were a few grand, would he destroy his company over just a few grand? You're asking the wrong question. You shouldn't be asking, would Josh destroy his company over a few grand? Would Anon destroy his company over a few grand? Anon is the CEO, so even if Josh and or Brandon were thinking like, oh, we're going to swipe a few grand in Legos, Anon could have gotten, he's their CEO, he's their boss. So he could have either told them, give them back, or him actually contact the police about Josh and Brandon. So it's not simply just about Josh and Brandon, it's about Anon as well, because you remember from the video footage we see, all the video footage that we've seen, with Ben interviewing him, with other people interviewing him, they're all saying, it never happened, it never happened, it never happened. And then it suddenly turned into, well, yeah, it did happen, but it didn't happen the way he did, the way you're saying it, obviously lying out of his ass the entire time. So it's not just the frontline franchisee owners, it's also the CEO it's ultimately speaking, Josh and Brandon push the first domino over. Anon is the one that did not stop the fall. Anon is the one that just let the dominoes continue to fall and might have even hastened their fall by basically putting a hurricane level leaf blower behind them to make them fall even faster.
Approves a subordinate's unconstitutional decision, that approval can count as the city's own act. And then you have 4, a failure to train. Under the Supreme Court case, City of Canton versus Harris, a city that is deliberately indifferent to an obvious need for training can be liable when the predictable violation arrives. Now, the 2 ground rules that frame everything else. First, there is no municipal liability without an underlying constitutional violation. You don't have to sue the officers, though. If no right was violated, if that's what the court determines, then there's nothing for the city to answer for. But hear the precision in that. An officer winning qualified immunity because the right wasn't clearly established is not a finding that no violation occurred. Those are different issues, which means the city can be held liable for a violation even if the individual officer walks. And second, the reason this episode exists, Owen versus City of Independence from 1980. Cities get no qualified immunity. None. The Supreme Court has said it flatly. Unlike officers, the city can't assert the good faith of its agents as a defense. The clearly established law that we kept hitting in prior videos, it doesn't exist here. Not for the city. So when you put all the cases together, you get your strategy. The best Manel vehicle is the claim where the underlying violation is cleanest. And in this story, that's the occupants of this home. Officers went into this home and arrested people they admitted they couldn't identify, had no information that they were whatsoever involved. They weren't on any warrant. So if a court says that claim is plausible or there is a potential violation, and say, for example, it goes to trial and the jury says these officers violated those occupants' Fourth Amendment, well, then the only remaining question for city liability is whether American Fork's own policy, custom, training failure, or ratification was the moving force. So let's go looking for the moving force. The city helpfully has been producing evidence. On May 29th, the American Fork Police Department issued a news release and published a 26-minute video on its official YouTube channel. It looks like they created the channel just to post that video. Chief Cameron Paul on camera, in uniform, walking through all 4 cases involving Ben, the stops, the sign, the warrant, the arrests, with the department's documents released alongside it, with the stated purpose of transparency and correcting misinformation. I do want to be fair. Proactively releasing your body camera and reports, I think that is genuinely good practice and other police departments should do it. So credit where due. But
No. They didn't, though. They did not proactively release their body cam footage. The body cam footage got leaked. I think there's some that was made publicly, but it was all redacted. Like the salient points of their body camera footage that got released were redacted. There was the unredacted body cam footage was the one that got accidentally released, and then the internet quickly snatched it up, and now there's no closing Pandora's box on that one. So, just to make that clear.
Watch what that video does legally.
Officer Richardson received information from an American Fork resident stating that several YouTubers had been renting an Airbnb property from this citizen. Officers responded to the Airbnb with the intent to arrest Snyder for an additional count of stalking. Upon arrival, officers developed probable cause, including information gathered from video surveillance from the Airbnb, to believe that Snyder had entered the residence and had not yet exited. Officers then prepared a search warrant affidavit requesting authorization to enter the residence to locate and arrest Snyder. As the individuals exited the residence, they were placed in handcuffs while officers secured the scene. All 5 individuals were transported to the American Fork Police Department. Ultimately, Detective Nicosia determined that Shaw, Allen, and Lautz appeared to have been acting at the direction and encouragement of Mr. Snyder. These 3 individuals were ultimately released from the police department. Mr. Snyder was subsequently transported to the Utah County Jail. Our responsibility was to enforce Utah law as officers established probable cause.
Yeah, the original one of this was so bad. The original one of that video was so bad. Multiple YouTubers, including myself, reacted to it, and no one could hear what this guy was saying. I had to, like, when I watched it on my stream, I had to boost the audio on. I had to max out my OBS audio slider and use an audio boost extension in the browser just to hear what this guy was saying. Like, I had to max out everything. This guy was whispering so fucking quietly.
Doesn't just describe the incidents. He defends them. He narrates the raid and the 5 arrests, explaining that 3 of the occupants were released only after a detective determined they, quote, appeared to have been acting at the direction and encouragement of Ben, and sums up the department's posture in one sentence. Our responsibility was to enforce Utah laws as officers established probable cause that a crime had occurred. He even rebuts Ben's injury claim with x-ray analysis, pointing out the little L on the film means left shoulder, while the footage shows officers handling the right arm.
During Snyder's detention,
Yeah,
Lieutenant
Ben talked about this.
Adamson took hold of Snyder's right arm.
This
Lieutenant
was an
Adamson
act of
later reported
desperation.
that he felt Snyder
This was him
tense his
trying to go,
arm,
look,
at which
see, he's
point
a liar because
Adamson
the x-ray
moved
had an
Snyder's
L
right
on
arm
it.
behind his back to place him into custody.
It's so,
Snyder-
it's so funny. It's everybody, when they watched this video, knew that the x-ray was just stock footage. Everybody, like every single, like, okay, not every single person. There are some dumbasses out there. But like 90% of the people that watched that video, when they saw that x-ray pop up on screen, they immediately assumed, oh, that's stock footage. That's not his actual x-ray. And this guy's acting like, well, look, the x-ray he put up had an L. It's not really his x-ray. He lied. See, we're in the right. And it's like, dude, you're a fucking idiot.
Later addressed this incident in one of his YouTube videos. In the x-ray image displayed by Mr. Snyder in that video, small L is visible in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah, he thought
of
he
the
had
x-ray.
such a gotcha here. It's
The
like,
L
dude,
indicates
the only person you
image
got
is that
was yourself.
of the left shoulder. The video shows Lieutenant Adamson handling Snyder's right arm during the arrest.
What's interesting about that level of detail is this is not a chief who just skimmed a summary. This is the head of an agency, after full review of everything, publicly adopting both the conduct of its officers and the reasons for it. On the warrant affidavit, which we tore apart in part 2, listen to how specifically he adopts its foundation.
Officers then prepared a search warrant affidavit requesting authorization to enter the residence to locate and arrest Snyder. During contact with the Airbnb owner, the owner reported overhearing conversations about possible stolen Legos. Specifically, officers wrote in the search warrant affidavit, the homeowner also disclosed that he could hear multiple individuals inside the residence speaking about possibly stolen Lego toys they had taken. Based on that information, officers added a request within the search warrant affidavit seeking authorization to also search for and seize possible stolen property.
I want to know what they actually put into the affidavit that they submitted to a judge for this. Because I would bet, unless the judge is corrupt himself, which not outside the realm of possibility in this neck of the woods, if they put into the affidavit that the homeowner overheard them talking about stolen Lego toys, again, no known open investigation into stolen Legos at all at this point. That's a key. That's number one, because the judge would ask, do you have an investigation about stolen Legos? And they go, no. And the judge would go, fuck off. Number two, if they put in that, oh, the homeowner overheard them saying something about this, the judge would say, that's it. And they go, yeah. And the judge would say, fuck off. That's hearsay. You're not getting me to sign off a warrant on that.
Including Lego merchandise.
The chief explains that the officers prepared the affidavit, quote, requesting authorization to enter the residence to locate and arrest Ben. It wasn't an arrest warrant. He then narrates that because the Airbnb owner, quote, reported overhearing conversations about possible stolen.
Wait, let me back that up because I think he said exactly what I said.
Authorization to enter the residence to locate and arrest Ben. It wasn't an arrest warrant.
That's what I said when this whole thing came down the pipe. They arrested Ben on a search warrant, not an arrest warrant. That's what I said from the very beginning.
He then narrates that because the Airbnb owner, quote, reported overhearing conversations about possible stolen Legos, officers, quote, added a request to also search and seize stolen property. That's the chief on camera restating the exact structure that we flagged. An arrest warrant in a search warrant clothing, even though there was no stolen Lego investigation. Yes. And even though the officers knew the Airbnb owner.
You remember we were doing Hydra with the guy with the Deagle? Remember when we did Hydra with the guy with the Desert Eagle? Yeah. This is his Airbnb. He's in my truck right now. Really? Isn't that small?
Uh-huh.
He was like, what the fuck? That's so funny.
That was never disclosed, never talked about. And they wanted it
Uh-huh.
redacted. And the whole process was based on this buddy homeowner's remark about what he may or may not have heard. But the chief says this is proper procedure. He said a district judge reviewed and approved that warrant.
4th District Judge
Uh-huh.
Roger W. Griffin reviewed and approved the search warrant.
But
So how much did this chief just fuck that judge over? Because now that judge can get looked at by DOJ of why are you signing search warrants based upon absolute hearsay? Why are you violating people's constitutional rights based upon hearsay?
a judge's signature doesn't launder an affidavit that's deficient on its face.
Yes.
And I did talk about that previously. But for today's purpose, the point is narrower and bigger at the same time. The chief didn't distance the department from that affidavit. He adopted its basis as the department's own position. And that matters because
And yeah, that was another big thing where that video clip is saying, did they just brag about doing drugs? Yeah, I was saying like when we did Hydro with that guy. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not exactly up on old drug culture. It certainly sounded like that those cops were bragging about doing drugs with that Airbnb owner. It did sound that way.
of the third Manel route that we talked about, ratification.
hydrocodone.
The Supreme Court has made clear that when a final policymaker approves a subordinate's decision and the basis for it, the city itself can own that decision. And the chief's video is about as close as real life you can get to ratification. He approved the decisions. The basis restated in detail approvingly on the department's own channel. Now, I will admit, Manel is usually hard. A lot of times cities are dismissed out because you can't establish a pattern, a written policy that a policymaker actually ratified or knew anything of any conduct, and it was just the officer acting rogue. 90% of the time, that's what ends up happening, and the city gets dismissed. So here, in all fairness, I do think Manel has a good chance of surviving, but it will be an uphill fight. Hill 1, you got to look at timing and causation. The video came out in late May. The arrest happened in March. Courts might wrestle with whether the after-the-fact ratification is actually the moving force behind a violation that's already over. I think the court should treat it as a post hoc approval, mainly as evidence of what the policy already was. A chief who publicly endorses this conduct after all this criticism is powerful evidence of what this police chief's department's actual operating policy was back in March. The second hill, is the chief the final policymaker? That's a question of state and local law usually, but it could also be a fact question. When I looked up the statute, it looks like that the chief is required to adopt the department's written policy on stops, detentions, searches, etc. The exact functions at issue here. And it looks like the statute also forbids cities from creating any board with power to veto policies, quote, established under the authority of the chief of police. But despite what any of it says, what the charter says, what state law says, it really comes down to the facts. Does this police chief have the authority and ability to exercise control and dominion over the police department? Does he make hiring decisions, disciplinary decisions? He's coming out and saying, I stand behind what happened here. Did he review it? Did he approve it? In the investigation process, if there's any complaints against the officers, does he have final authority, regardless what the investigation holds? For example, if the investigation said these officers violated someone's rights, can the police chief say, well, it doesn't matter? These are all things that you'd have to get in discovery. So even if the city has these rules in place or the Utah has rules in place that say the police chief is under control of, say, city council, but city council just kind of delegated authority to him blindly and he gets to do what he wants, well, that's Manel. And I would say a police chief who's getting in front of a camera and defending these decisions and making decisions about what to release, it sounds like there's smoke there as to whether or not he's actually a final policymaker that has the authority to ratify unlawful conduct. I know I said a lot there. So the ultimate question is, who has final authority over law enforcement operations and policy? It could be the police chief. It could be multiple people. That's ultimately the question. And then Hill 3, merely declining to discipline officers after the fact isn't ratification. Courts say that regularly. But what makes this video different from the routine we investigated ourselves and found no wrongdoing is its specificity. It detailed public on-the-record adoption of both conduct and rationale. That, of course, lined up with redacted videos, not the unredacted ones. It's different, but the plaintiffs still have to win the argument that different is enough. And if you want the single cleanest clip for the exhibit binder, it's how the chief ends the video. After narrating the 4 cases, dozens of...
You're right. Like, I don't know if he's going to go into it, but there is, like, yeah, that city council meeting that we saw where multiple people came up to the mic and were basically saying that they are, that the police department has failed, that they are corrupt, that they are basically going to bring the entire city down. And then you had that council member who was like, oh, thank you, police. You're so wonderful. We love the police. So you have a diametric opposition of what the city council thinks versus what the populace thinks. I don't know if that is going to factor in to this discussion, but we'll see.
Officer decisions, the warrant, the 5 arrests, and not identifying one error in any of it, he closes.
We remain committed to enforcing the law fairly, objectively,
yes, the one where they would
and
not shut off the
transparently,
alarm,
regardless of who is involved or what narrative may exist.
As a statement of values, it's admirable. But as evidence in a ratification case, it's the head of the agency certifying that after a full review, that everything you watched in prior videos and other videos is what fair, objective enforcement looks like in American Fork. The plaintiffs couldn't have scripted it better themselves. Now let's talk about custom. A practice so persistent it has the force of law. One incident, even a 4-day incident, usually can't prove a custom on its own. Sometimes court reject even 3 incidents. You have to establish a full pattern and practice so persistent that every officer understood what the custom actually was. It's not an easy fight. So the question ultimately becomes, has anyone else accused this department of operating this way or in a similar way? And the answer in the federal courthouse is yes, twice in the last 6 years. Lawsuit 1, Bolt versus American Fork City, filed in 2020 in the District of Utah. Nancy Bolt ran Canary Garden, a nonprofit providing grief support, planning to add LGBTQ plus support and suicide prevention services. The complaint alleges that an American Fork officer cited her for operating a business without a license, when the municipal code on face exempts charitable nonprofits. It alleges the officer's incident report contained a false statement about a months-old warning that was actually 2 weeks old. It alleges the citation was issued without probable cause, that she was singled out. So now let's talk about the second lawsuit, Thorpe versus Cedar Hills in American Fork, filed in 2023. It's still active today. There was a neighbor dispute in which the complaint alleges that the department, under the prior chief, wholesale adopted one side.
I think this is the one that we went over. I am reasonably sure did we go over this one? No, I think I may have looked at this one off stream. I think I looked at this. Yeah, this is a separate one. I looked at this one off stream. I couldn't get enough, like, so I saw this, I saw this lawsuit, but I couldn't find enough, like, good, solid information to be able to talk about it on stream. But I did look at this.
3. It's still active today. There was a neighbor dispute in which the complaint alleges that the department, under the prior chief, wholesale adopted one side. The amended complaint's language is striking. It alleges that the American Fork Police Department, quote, fully adopted the ideology of one family as, quote, the good guys, and the Thorpes as, quote, the bad guys. And then there are the complaint's words creating false and slanted incident reports that validated every complaint from the favored side without any investigation. And it presumed that the Thorpes were guilty of anything alleged against them. The Thorpes law.
Boy, doesn't this sound familiar? Doesn't this sound exactly like the incident we saw a couple days ago, like last week, where crazy woman calls crying, fake crying, and saying that, oh, this woman was yelling. I wasn't there for her, but I know for sure she was yelling. And the American Fork PD went, okay, and they went and terrified the other family just on this mystery woman say so. This sounds like the exact same fucking thing. Automatically taking this caller at her word. She's the good guy, they're the bad guy, and we're gonna fuck up the bad guy. It's the exact, so I don't know if he's gonna bring that up or not, because that information about the more recent one that we watched came out before he put this video out. So there is a pattern, because you have the two that he's talking about, and you have the third that we watched on that last week. So that's a pattern of blatant misconduct. Blatant misconduct, and God only knows what other civil rights violations by the American Fork PD.
Lawyers pleaded it as exactly what we've been discussing: a custom, unconstitutional policy and pattern of condoning this kind of policing. The police department takes sides for no reason at all. Now, hold those allegations up from the search warrant in Ben's case, an affidavit built on a homeowner's vague secondhand theft claim, a homeowner's that officers on their own video describe as someone they know personally, an affidavit that named a suspect and then swept up everybody there. They picked a side. It matches what's already happening in federal court. This is precisely the operating pattern that two separate federal complaints have already alleged against this police department before Ben ever arrived into town. Now, in all fairness, the Bolt and Thorpe complaints are just allegations. They have not been adjudicated. There's been no finding whatsoever that American Fork has been found to have an unconstitutional custom policy or practice. And obviously, the police department denies any wrongdoing in both. But
Of course they do.
It's still interesting nonetheless. It obviously signals that this small community.
Yeah, the one where the AFPD scared the children in the house by like banging the fuck out of the doors and ringing the doorbell. To my knowledge, that has not even been a civil filing has not even been made in respect to that as of yet. Now, maybe a civil filing has occurred and we just haven't heard about it yet. But as so far, publicly speaking, I have not heard about the victim family there that were terrified by the American Fork PD. I have not heard about them basically securing the services of an attorney and filing a civil suit against the department for their actions.
Community has some issues, and the lawsuits themselves, regardless what you think of the allegations, arguably provide notice to the police department and the policymakers that as police officers do act in certain ways that might require training or observation. And I think that in and of itself could be used. Now let's talk about Route 4, which is the failure to train piece. The Supreme Court said that a city can be liable when the need for training is so obvious and the lack of it is likely to cause constitutional violations. And the city's inaction to provide that training amounts to deliberate indifference.
But the town citizens file a class action suit against the police department, not out of pocket. And by that I mean unless the citizens have specific complaints individually, unless multiple citizens have individual complaints against the police of misconduct that have been inflicted against them, then no, they would not be able to file a class action lawsuit. Now, if the actions of the police department have resulted in multiple lawsuits against the city, resulting in the city taking monetary losses, therefore causing the city to be forced to raise taxes to cover the losses of the city, then maybe possibly that you would have a potential avenue of a civil route to go through. But then I don't know if it would be against the police department or if it would be against the city. So it's basically, to make it simple, unless a plethora of citizens of American Fork PD were the recipients of civil rights violations by the American Fork PD, no, they would not be able to just out of pocket file a class action lawsuit against the police department because they are not victims of anything, so they wouldn't be able to file the suit.
And the Supreme Court tightened that over the years, essentially saying you need a pattern of similar violations to put the city on notice. Single incidents only work in rare, obvious cases. So for this, we would actually have to look to see what kind of training did these officers have. Well, I was able to get my hands on the officers' training histories. 9 officers total. Let me show you what their record says. I'm going to start with Lieutenant Adamson. His record is the most extensive. That's because he's been doing this since at least 2010. That's how long he's been with the American Fork Police Department. It's interesting that apparently during that time, you see from 2017 to 2018, he was with Provo City Constable's office. So I don't know if he was dual hatting, but he has a ton of certifications here. So Adamson is the most senior officer that appears to have been actively involved in this whole ordeal, at least from what we can tell. American Fork released their video on May 29th after the lieutenant, who was actively involved, took a 40-hour public and media relations course. But what's evident,
He took a public and media relations course after the incident. After the whole thing with Ben, they gave him a 40-hour public and media relations course. Interesting. Why would you have your lieutenant taking a 40-hour public and media relations course after you've already violated someone's constitutional rights?
in all of these records that you'll see are the amount of tactics and firearms. So I'm going to scroll through and I want you to pay attention to that. We have defensive tactics here from May 5th.
That's a lot of courses that took place after. Now, some of it is recertification. Like this one is a less lethal recertification. We have a refresher use of a rack refresher, de-escalation use of force. Like a lot of this stuff is happening after because remember, the incident with Ben was in March of 2026. So all of this is happening after what happened with Ben.
Use of force for 1 hour, May 5th. SWAT training day back on April 16th. SWAT training day back on April 2nd. SWAT training day back on March 19th. Defensive tactics back on March 10th. Active shooter, March 10th. Use of force, March 10th. SWAT training day, March 5th. SWAT training day, April 19th. SWAT training day, January 2026.
Interesting.
More defensive tactics. Use of force. Firearm night shooter back in December a couple of times. Identifying a meth lab and their dangers. Another SWAT training day. Patrol tactical training. So I want you to notice something that's evident in these records. As we go through them, you can clearly see that there is nothing at all about First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, constitutional rights, period. All you see are use of force, tactics, firearm, pistol, and rifle.
It's all shooting and beating people up and finding meth labs. There's nothing in further training for the law. There's no training in this so far in respect to knowing and understanding the law and as citizen civil rights. Yeah, and this is lieutenant. This is the most senior officer in the department, next to like the chief and maybe a deputy chief.
And SWAT. That's what you see here. Arrest control. And all of these things are only an hour here, an hour there.
There's search and seizure. Hold up. He passed it up. Hang on. Search and seizure phase 1 and 2. So he did a search and seizure training course on September 2nd of 2025. So he should have not. So that would have been Fourth Amendment right there for search and seizure. Right there.
So that's for since 2025 to present. All right. Now let's go over to Officer Gonzalez. He's been a police officer since February 26, 2026. He's a new guy. So let's look at the type of training that he has received. Defensive tactics.
Okay.
For 1 hour.
DUI.
Evidence for 30
Okay.
minutes. Use of force for 1
Okay.
hour. And then he had his basic law enforcement officer course for 392 hours back from December to February, December 2025 to February 2026. He did.
So, okay, so he had his basic law enforcement 3 months. He's like 3.5 months. So that was basically quote unquote police academy. He's real fucking new. Yeah, he is the FNG.
He did have a basic special function officer course back in 2019. It's unclear why he didn't complete it, though, but he departed back in December 2019. So Ben's attorneys, if they file a lawsuit, they may want to look into what happened with Officer Gonzalez here back in 2019. Yeah. Was there any misconduct or any other concerns, or was it completely unrelated? Maybe it was a medical family emergency. Who knows? Now let's look at Hawkins. He's been with the American Fork Police Department since 2022. That's been the only department
Thank you,
he's
Griffin
been with.
Knights.
And we look at the training he received.
Uh-huh.
He also attended, in the middle of all of this, May 18th to May 22nd, public and media relations for 40 hours. But when we go through his records, you see more of the same as everything we've seen so far. Defensive tactics, evidence, use of force, more defensive tactics. And these things are all for an hour, maybe 2 hours or less.
Yeah, take note of this. Is the media, he got 40 fucking hours of media training, and all the rest of this training, to include what was on the lieutenant's training record, which was that search and seizure phase 1 and 2, all less combined than fucking PR training. Think about that. He received more training in public relations than literally everything else in his training list, to include search and seizures, which would cover Fourth Amendment.
The only thing he has actually received substantial training on recently has been that media and public relations.
Post-incident. Exactly.
And then as
they
we
gave
keep
them
scrolling
all
here,
public media training.
you see it's more of the same. You have use of force, firearm night shooter, identifying a meth lab, defensive tactics. But again, you are seeing absolutely nothing related to First Amendment, Fourth Amendment. When can you go into a home?
Yep.
What's the difference between a search warrant and arrest warrant? And when can you just choose to arrest anybody that you see fit? There is none of that in there. But what we do have are arrest control.
Lot of
There was a
tactics,
search
use
and
of
seizure
force,
phase
SWAT
1
training.
and 2 for 2 hours back in
There it
September
is.
2025.
That's what I was talking about. So, and this search and seizure phase 1 and 2, what could encompass Fourth Amendment? That would be, the civil rights. That'd be the person's Fourth Amendment civil rights, constitutional rights of illegal, unlawful search and seizure. 2 hours. Again, 2 hours on constitutional rights, 40 hours on PR training.
Followed on that same day, use of force. And then more search and seizure, more arrest control. There you go. Now moving on to Laycock. Laycock has
Give me 1 second, chat. I use the bathroom. All right, I'm back. Let's get back to it.
been a peace officer since 2021. Started out with the Salt Lake County Sheriff's Office and has been with the American Fork Police Department since October 2022. And we see the most recent training after all of this was arrest control back in May of 2026.
Oh, this one didn't get the PR training.
Use of force, also May 12th, 2026. Attended Utah County Sheriff's Hell Week, April 24th, 2026 for 20 hours. And then several SWAT training days. One obviously in March, one in April. Defensive tactics, use of force, more SWAT training days, more defensive tactics.
Boy, they love those SWAT training
but
days,
nothing
don't
about constitutional rights. And I'm just going to scroll through just so you can keep seeing. He as the other officers took a search and seizure phase 1 and 2. So presumably in that 2-hour class, they should have learned about the Fourth Amendment. They should have recognized that just because someone is located where you're going to execute a search warrant, that doesn't give you authority to search and seize other people just by mere presence. But we don't know. It was only for 2 hours. So, you go get that in discovery and find out. It looks like he's also maybe their armorer as well. All right. So now we get to Officer Neal. He's been a police officer since 2023 with American Fork Police Department. And you're going to see a lot of the same.
The same, yeah.
Defensive tactics after this incident, as you see here from May 12, 2026. Use of force, defensive tactics.
No PR for him either.
Active shooter, use of force, restraint instructor course, defensive tactics. More use of force, firearm training, defensive tactics. But again, just as with the other officers, you don't see anything about constitutional rights, First Amendment rights, Fourth Amendment rights.
And what he's doing by showing all of this is he's establishing a pattern. You've got he's getting to it, the search and seizure phase 1 and 2. He's establishing a pattern that they're training their officers. The argument that could be made is they are receiving a precipitous amount of, effectively speaking, combat training. They're getting a fuck ton of combat training, and they're receiving next to no training in terms of the law and a citizen's civil and constitutional rights. I think that's the angle that he's going with here, is that out of all this training, 80 to 90% of it is, effectively speaking, combat-oriented, use of force-oriented, where there is a precipitous lack of training in regards to the law and how the law is enforced, and basically the law that police officers are expected to obey under the Constitution regarding First Amendment, Fourth Amendment, things of that nature. I think that's the angle he's going to by showing all of this history. Yeah, they're training them to be like paramilitary type soldiers, not police officers.
He did get that 2-hour training on search and seizure. Again, we don't really know how in-depth that was. Nicosia, I'm probably botching the name, but you're going to see the same thing. This individual has been a peace officer since 2018. And very similar training. Defensive tactics, arrest control, use of force, firearms, more defensive training, more defensive tactics, firearms, search and seizure back in 2025 for 2 hours. Richardson, you're going to see the same thing. He's been a peace officer since 2024, the entire time with the American Fork Police Department.
So he's
And
another
with
new
other
guy.
officers, you have
He's
defensive
been around
tactics,
for about 2 years.
use of force, active shooter, use of force, defensive tactics, use of force, firearms.
When all you do is train them in use of force,
More firearms,
weapons,
more defensive
tactics,
tactics.
everything. They're hammers where everything
September
looks like a nail.
2025
That's
two-hour
the
search and
argument, I
seizure
think.
course, together with use of force.
Well, these are just like the 6
There
that
you
he
go.
was able to get all of their
Nothing
records. Don't know how
about
many are on the
First
department
Amendment,
in
Fourth
total.
Amendment. Then you have Officer Sumbot, been a police officer since December 2022 with American Fork Police Department. And with everyone else, defensive tactics, arrest control, use of force, defensive tactics, active shooters, use of force, more defensive
Yeah,
tactics.
he's going to go somewhere with this.
More
This
use of
is not
force,
just rambling
firearm
off their
shooters.
resumes just for the fuck of it. He's probably going to go where I was
That
going with
September
it, where it'll
2025
showcase
search and
there's a
seizure
lack
course,
of training for
together with the
constitutionality,
use
and they're
of
training
force,
them to
and
be
then Tonga.
combatants.
Tonga is a fairly new peace officer, has been
Oh yeah, he
peace
is
officer,
a real
a licensed
FNG.
peace officer since February 27, 2025, all with the American Fork Police Department. And with everyone else, defensive tactics, evidence, use of force, defensive tactics, Hell Week back in April 2024. So right before all of this interaction, you had a couple of officers who just went through Hell Week. What does that involve? Is that what made them feel like they had to target Ben and his friends? And then SWAT day training back in April.
Multiple SWAT
back in
day
May-
training.
March, more defensive tactics.
3 SWAT day
Active
trainings in a
shooter,
row for
use of
training.
force, more SWAT training, more
Jesus,
defensive
fuck.
tactics. Firearm, SWAT, patrol tactical training, more defensive tactics. But what is missing from any of this list, as we saw with other police officers with American Fork, is no one received any training whatsoever, at least not that they've reported, on First or Fourth Amendment rights. They all
Yes.
received training, search and seizure, phase 1 and 2, back in September of 2025. 2 hours worth. That's the search and seizure refresher these officers carried into that March raid. And then when we look at Lieutenant Adamson's record, it runs back 16 years, over 2,750 hours. The only other search and seizure line item on it is 2.5 hours. And that was back in 2018. And across
Yay.
all 9 officers' records, thousands of hours of firearms, defensive tactics,
Yep.
active
Yep.
shooter scenarios, SWAT schools, taser recertifications.
They were making
But
soldiers,
there's not
cops.
one line item anywhere that mentions the First Amendment. Nothing on recording, nothing on protests, retaliation, or the rights of people pointing cameras at you or hanging signs at a moment when policing a YouTuber was this department's biggest case. Is it possible they got off the books training? Yeah, sure. But that's going to be for discovery.
not gonna help
And
them
I
in
would
suit.
hope that these officers know what the First Amendment is and what the Fourth Amendment is. But I'm just telling you what the police officers' training records show and what they don't. I mean, look at Officer Richardson, the man that drafted the search warrant affidavit, or really the arrest affidavit, disguised as a search affidavit. He was the primary on the case. He wrote the operations plan for the raid. He was certified as a law enforcement officer on December 19th, 2024. So 14 months on the job. Officer Gonzalez in the entry stack that morning to go into the house was certified on February 26th, 2026, 11 days before the entire saga began.
He was that was a guy that was 11 days on the job when they went after Ben. 11 days.
Officer Tonga, the one who took the first call on March 8th. They were with the department for about a year. In the seasoned supervision on the scene, Lieutenant Adamson, 16 years, assigned to the perimeter. I think he was the one that went and reached Ben's arm, twisted it, presumably because he didn't want him recording, wanted to stop the recording. So my question there too is there a failure to supervise issue? This town has its biggest case, a warrant application, an ops plan, and they hand it to an officer with 14 months out of the academy. And then they put an 11-day officer in the stack. What systems were there to catch these predictable mistakes? And whose decision was it to just arrest everybody? Was that part of the plan? Again, that's one of the things where hopefully there's a lawsuit and there's discovery. And we can find all this information out. But what is clear when we watch the videos from all these days, the prolonged stop on the 9th, the sign issues on the 11th, the mere presence, arrest of all the occupants, with nobody up the chain catching any concerns, with nobody up the chain seeing any issue with it before, during, or after. When that happens across the department's roster rather than inside just one officer's head, that is exactly what a training and supervision gap looks like from the outside. And the chief's video does double duty there, because when you have a leadership team or a chief that claims to have reviewed all of it and finds nothing to correct and nothing wrong with it, is a leadership team that tells you on the record that it sees nothing to train or retrain. What's also interesting from these training records is after Ben's story went viral, what kind of training do you think they got? Public and media relations for 40 hours. May 18th through May 22nd.
The most outside of the academy, the most extensive training that they have received in fucking years was the public and media relations, the PR training, 40 fucking hours after everything went tits up with Ben. That's the kind of training that they received, a massive amount of PR training.
2026. Completed by Officer Hawkins, the officer who ordered the March 9th dog sniff, ending exactly 1 week before the chief's video and press release went out. So did he go get this training to be able to help the chief get in front of the message? They're like, let's go start a YouTube. Maybe it's completely innocent. Maybe Hawkins was just simply moving to be a spokesman for the police department, but he's not the one that did the video.
Sure.
Right? And it had nothing to do with department policy. But compare that. Search and seizure, 2 hours. Media relations after a story blows up, 40 hours. So the police department was very invested in the narrative, not the doctrine. And I will also say,
and by the way, I should also point out that 40 hours of media training, the department paid for that too. Keep in mind, all of the training that we saw in each of those officers' rosters, it's not like the state funded that and it's like all the cops are getting that out of the goodness of their heart. No, the police department paid for every single one of those training courses. Meaning, the taxpayers of American Fork paid for all of that training. Not to mention that the police department paid for the training and the police department paid the officers to go to the training as well. Like, that's part of a department's budget. Part of a department's budget is training. It is facilitating training for your officers. So every single one of those training courses that they were sent to that came out of the police department's budget, they pay the state to facilitate that training.
I didn't see any records pertaining to canine handling. Maybe that's internal. I don't know. I did submit a request specific to the department for other information. We'll see if they produce it. And I will say, failure to train is pretty hard because you do have to show a pattern in practice. I do think that, again, there's enough there, but it is still going to be an uphill battle. I've already said that. I would definitely like to see, though, the internal personnel files of these police officers. What kind of training did they actually get? The audit trail of that affidavit, who actually reviewed it, who approved it. And the records the department chose to release versus the unredacted is interesting as well. And if you want full disclosure, full transparency, as the police department said they wanted to give, the only way, if they're not going to release it, is to file a lawsuit and get that stuff in discovery. To me, it is clear and incredibly obvious that the city should be on the hook for this, especially when that media relations piece, the police chief comes out and says everything was above board by the book. And it's great because against the officers, the qualified immunity question is backward looking and narrow. Was there some earlier case that clearly established this issue? Did some other police department, police officer somewhere commit similar violations that a court had said was against the law and you should know better. But here, against the city, the court doesn't ask that question. They just say, was there a constitutional violation? And what was the city's operating policy, practice, or custom? Plaintiffs' lawyers who do civil rights work, they're going to tell you like Manila is generally hard because courts do protect cities. But in this case, I think it presents a more plausible claim than other cases. I'd like to see what is the department's operating policy, who reviews the decisions of these officers, how many complaints were made against these officers, who reviewed those complaints, what happened to those. Who knows? I would like to see all of that. Hopefully we do one day. But there is a path to put the city of American Fork on trial and actually hold them accountable for the conduct of their police officers. And maybe then citizens and city council and elected leaders will say, hey, hold on a second. Maybe we need to do something different here. So where does the story stand? The occupants of that Airbnb hold the strongest claims, not just against the officers, but also against the city. And if they go after the city, remember there's no immunity problem, and the cleanest vehicle to reach the city itself is through a Manila claim through that raid. Ben's claims with everything, that could be an uphill battle. And whether American Fork as a city has to answer for any of these incidents or issues is going to come down to whether, one, there's a lawsuit filed and how the court applies the doctrines we've discussed. If it gets that far, they can obviously use the chief's own 26-minute video. Anyway, that's all I have for today. As this case develops or anything changes, I'll be sure to provide you an update. I would also like to thank Plod for sponsoring this video. Again, you can save up to 15% by using code CE15. Just check the link in the description. This is clearly established. Until next time, thanks for watching.
Yeah, there's one factor that he did not did not address, probably because he is a civil attorney, is there is still, if the state or the Fed opens their own criminal investigation into misconduct against, if the DOJ opens a civil rights violation case against this town, that also can throw a wrinkle in the things. Because if there is a criminal civil rights violation that the Fed can make a case stick in court, that bolsters any civil case that could be brought against the police department in the aftermath of something. And I still think the way to go on this one, my personal opinion, the way to go on this one is to push for a criminal investigation through the Fed. I think trying to push through a civil rights, trying to go through it civilly, is you're doing an uphill battle. Whereas there seems to be, based on the information we have thus far, you have a much more clear-cut criminal investigation that probably could be facilitated much more expediently and much more easily than a civil. So you basically facilitate the criminal case first, get the criminal case locked in, get that sorted, and then the civil case can come on its heels and basically just mop up monetarily after the criminal case has run its course. That, to me, I think is still the most efficient and effective way of, quote-unquote, attacking this situation on two different fronts. That's just my opinion.
Ember burns bright.